This might not be something that you want to hear, but you need to find something to tie yourself down. Now, as you can see, I am currently in my truck, in the cab of my truck, recording a podcast. And that is because I had a lack of urgency around having this podcast, getting on camera and speaking, things like that. I really just had kind of a lack of urgency. I was not really paying attention, and the 2 weeks kind of snuck up on me, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, I got to go record a podcast, and I'm not even sure what I'm going to talk about. And I did come up with something to talk about because I had a very interesting conversation yesterday with someone, and I just thought I would kind of talk on that, kind of expound on that. We had a good conversation. His name was Derek. We had a good conversation about something. Anyway, and so but I didn't write anything down yesterday. And I went through the entire night. I didn't wake up super early to record a podcast. I'm not even sure why. I think just because there was a lack of urgency, and that's on me. That's on me. And here we are. We're already a day late, might be a couple days late, but the podcast must go on. All right. And so, like I said, I had no idea what I was even going to talk about. And then this conversation yesterday kind of like sparked something in my mind, kind of got the wheels turning, so to speak. And the subject that I want to talk about is very, very closely aligned with the mission of this channel, which a personal goal of mine is to lead 100 people to a happier and more fulfilled life. And I think that for a lot of people that thing that could take them to a happier and more fulfilled life would be like entrepreneurship. That's my own personal belief. That's my own personal thinking. I'm not going to talk about entrepreneurial stuff really today. It's going to be on a different subject matter, but it's going to very, very closely align with that mission that I have, the mission for this channel. And I think the subject that I want to talk about is that I think a lot of people, they need to find an anchor. Now, what do I mean by that? They need something that ties them down a little bit more. Something that inspires them or maybe even forces them to become a better version of themselves. And I think, like starting a business, starting a nonprofit, starting something that you are passionate about, I think that's a good way to help achieve that goal, like tie yourself down, get committed to something that means a lot to you. But in my conversation yesterday, I was approaching like the commitment, the tying oneself down. I was talking about marriage. And to be completely honest, like there are times that, kind of on this entrepreneurial journey, I took what I would call like an entrepreneurial plunge. Didn't understand what I was doing and just didn't care, just jumped right in. There were times since then that I have wished, and there are times even still that the thought kind of pops into my head that, you know what, this might be a lot easier if I didn't have a wife and kids. Like, maybe I should have started this business way back when I was single. Or maybe I should just not try to start a business, especially since I have wife and kids and they depend on me for finances. They depend on me for pretty much everything. And, maybe it's not a good time to be out there trying to build something for yourself. Maybe I should just go get a job. Those are thoughts that kind of go on in my head. But I just want to counter that. Like maybe my wife and my kids are the reason that I am less scattered and more focused at this point in my life. And I think I might have told this story already, but I'm going to go over it a little bit again here and kind of maybe highlight a different aspect of it. But when I was in high school, I think maybe I just got out of high school, my dad actually told me that, you know what, you lack commitment. And it wasn't in a mean way, it wasn't in a harsh way, it wasn't to put me down or to you know, you're an idiot for lacking commitment. He was just pointing out a very, very simple fact. There were certain things that were going on in my life, and he said, well, this is basically his perspective. You lack commitment, is what he told me. And for years, I never knew what he was talking about. Like, why did he say that? Like, I show up to work every day on time. I work 5 days a week. I'm one of the best workers at my workplace. Why in the world is he talking to me that way? And even when I got married, I wouldn't even say like I knew what commitment was then. And I'm not trying to say that I didn't want to be committed to my wife. I didn't want to be committed to my family. That's not what I'm trying to say. All I'm saying is like that really, really, like my level of commitment and like what commitment meant to me, like that really, really got tested in 2023. And I'm going to paint this picture a little bit just to kind of get us in the right, or give you some context, you could say. So when we lived in Oregon, when I first started my business, I actually had my desk out in the living room. We had like a little stand/desk thing that I had made. That's where my computer was. That's where I did all of my work. But that kind of created some problems because, with kids running through the house or with the wife working around the house, like it's very, very easy to get distracted. And so I talked to my wife and I was like, well, I want my own office. Maybe I should buy like a mini barn or something like that, stick my office outside of the house. Maybe even some conversation around putting it out in our garage. But instead, like, we decided to put my office in our bedroom, which was a mistake at this. Like, I look at that now and I can see like that was a mistake. And I don't know if you've read James Clear's Atomic Habits, but he talks about don't put your workstation inside of your bedroom, because when you walk into your bedroom, your brain starts thinking a particular way, which is usually it's time to go to bed and time to go to sleep. And if your work is in that same room that you sleep in, then you're probably going to be very unproductive because your mind's thinking it's time to go to sleep and you're sitting down and trying to get a bunch of work done. Usually doesn't work. Like your subconscious mind is crazy. Like all of the habits and routines that it forms and like just the way that it operates and tries to conserve energy. It just makes us do some funny things whether we realize it or not. Anyway, I had my workstation in our room, and the thing about this house is like when we moved in there, I think there might have been like a total of 5 overhead lights. There was a couple in the kitchen. There was one over the sink, which was like a can light, and then there was a couple overhead lights, like ceiling lights, in the kids' bedroom. And our bedroom, the one that me and my wife slept in, it didn't have any overhead lights. And so everything was lit by lamps, right? And so like, if a room is not lit well, there's just a lot of shadows. Even if you stick a bunch of lamps in there, there's just a bunch of shadows and everything is just a little bit darker than it should be. And I think you could probably relate to that. You probably know of a room like that or a house like that. Anyway, and so my desk was actually crammed into a corner of this room that had no overhead lights in it. And it was crammed in between a dresser and a wall. And it was so tight in there that if I was sitting at my desk, you couldn't use the dresser behind me because there just wasn't enough room to pull out the drawers. Like that's how tight it was in there. And there was no windows that you could really look out of because the window that was in the room was kind of behind a dresser at that point because we'd moved some stuff around in order to have room enough to put a desk in there. And so it's really dark, it's really dingy. And the corner of the bedroom that I'm in, where my desk is at, is even darker and dingier than the rest of the room because it's kind of a little nook off of the bedroom, and it was not the ideal place to put a workstation. And I don't know if you guys study into that about like your work environment and not being too crammed into a little spot because it, you know, takes your creativity down a couple levels. You've probably heard of some stuff about that. If you haven't, like it's an interesting study to go and like study some of that stuff, like how your work environment can actually affect your productivity. Anyway, and so like I'm trying to start a new business, a new company in this dark, dingy office. And I didn't have many leads, and any leads that I did have, I wouldn't necessarily consider like good leads. And at this point, for the first couple of months, I just did some family and friends projects, but at a certain point, I was like, I don't have any more leads. I'm not making any money, and I've got a wife and a kid at that point. I've got a wife and a kid that I need to provide for. So I need to figure out how to create leads and how to close leads. And so I paid somebody for coaching on how to run a video production business. And here's a little side note. I got to stop doing these little side notes, but this one I just want to put out there because I think it's valuable experience that young entrepreneurial people could use. Paying for all of that coaching, it was very expensive, okay? And it pretty much wiped out all of the savings that we had up to that point. And if you're just getting started, I would not recommend paying a bunch of money to somebody for coaching, especially if you're young and just getting started. Go find a local business owner that is willing to give you some insights and learn from them. Even if they don't have the same type of company that you have, like there's going to be things that you could learn from a local business owner. He could give you some insights. He could give you some valuable tricks and tips that would help you avoid a bunch of mistakes. Don't go pay for a bunch of coaching right off the bat. Get some experience under your belt first. That's just my own 2 bits there, but I would not do it the same again. And if you remember, I didn't have much of a pipeline. There wasn't much to look forward to. I didn't have like a huge payday coming that would just, I could fill the savings back up and live for a couple months off the rest of it. It wasn't like that. Nobody was beating down my door to do business with me because I was brand new and nobody knew who I was. I was insecure about myself and my business. I was tired of all the rejection that I was getting, sending out all those emails, making all of those phone calls, and still nothing. I was tired of all of that rejection, and I was just done trying to find new leads. And I remember walking one morning, done with my little morning routine, and I remember walking and sitting down at my computer and thinking to myself, I really, really hate this. I really, really do not want to do this. I am tired of this dark and dingy office. I'm tired of reaching out to people. I'm tired of people not getting back to me. I am so sick and tired of trying to find new leads. And it was right then that I remembered like what my dad had said back in high school, telling me that I didn't know what commitment was. And at that moment, I was like, you know what? I really think he's right. Up to that point, I had never done anything in my life that had really, really tested me and pushed me to the point of like just being so sick and tired of like an aspect of life or of business. I'd never had that before. And come to the realization that I need to continue to do it just because if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it for me. And I remember distinctly thinking that. Like if I don't send the emails, nobody's going to send the emails for me. If I don't make the phone calls, nobody's coming in here to make the phone calls for me. If I don't find my next client, there will not be a next client because nobody is coming to run my business for me. It was at that moment I was like, you know what? This is commitment. This is what commitment feels like. It doesn't always feel good, by the way. Now I tell this story to kind of like illustrate a certain point, and that is like if I wasn't married and if I didn't have to provide for a wife and kids, if I didn't have to provide for my family, I probably wouldn't have stuck with it. Because I wasn't just trying to provide for my family, because I could do that at a regular job, right? I was trying to build a business that would allow me to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, which is what I believe Tony Robbins calls success. I wasn't, at this point, I wasn't just making decisions based on what was comfortable or what I wanted to do. I was thinking further into the future. I was thinking about different people. I was making decisions based on previous commitments that I had made to my wife, to my kids. Starting a business was hard enough, but having that nagging thought in the back of your mind of being responsible for a wife and kids just added a whole nother level of pressure. Now, I was talking to somebody else the other day. It wasn't Derek, it was somebody else. And we were discussing pressure and feeling pressure from certain people to do certain things. And I believe my natural tendency, and I think for a lot of humans, their natural tendency is they want to avoid pressure as much as possible. Now, there might be some people that thrive under pressure and they look for that pressure and they want that pressure. There's more than likely people like that. But, we were talking about this pressure and he was feeling pressure from certain people and to do certain things. And it wasn't anything bad. It was just, I asked him, I said, well, is that pressure a bad thing? Because I think a lot of times we try to avoid that pressure. We try to avoid the hard things or the things that might feel like they back us into a corner. We try to avoid those things, but really I think a lot of times those things could be the things that we need to do. Those things are good things. That pressure is a good thing. And I'd ask you the same thing here. Maybe you're feeling financial pressure. Maybe you're feeling pressure from family, or maybe you're feeling pressure from a business partner, or you're feeling pressure from something to do, or you're feeling pressure from someone to do something. And just ask yourself, is this pressure a good thing? Think about it. The pressure of having to make something work will make you do things that you wouldn't do if it wasn't forced upon you, right? So having a wife, having a kids, having people that depend upon you, and not having an income or not having enough income will force you to do things that you wouldn't normally do. That pressure will put you in a situation where you have to go do something. You have to do something, and everything that you've done up to this point hasn't worked, and so it's probably going to be something new, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of us. And there's a saying in the self-development / entrepreneurial space that you've probably heard. And the saying goes like this: the magic you're looking for is in the work that you're avoiding. And that quote is accredited to Depen Parmar. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think that I and you will always put off the work that we don't like unless we or our circumstances force us to face it and lock in and just do it. So we're kind of in the entrepreneurial space right now. I guess I did say that we weren't going to talk a whole lot about this, but here we are. But getting back to marriage, why would I recommend marriage? Because if you listen to the rest of this, all the podcasts leading up to this, hasn't been a real inspirational story, right? But just stick with me. Now, I think there's a trend. I know that there is a trend of what type of humor is currently in. What are the cool kids laughing about? What humor do they have? And I don't claim to have my finger on the pulse of pop culture and what the youths of today are thinking. I'm not going to claim that. But when I taught school, I noticed a certain way that the students would talk about themselves and their worth. It was pretty alarming. It was pretty alarming to me. It was cool to talk about yourself as being worthless. It was cool to talk about yourself, it was cool to talk about unaliving yourself or, just dark humor. The humor was very dark. Way, way darker than I was allowed. to talk about or express when I was their age. And I'm not going to try to claim that like I'd never laugh at dark humor, because there is some stuff online that is absolutely hilarious, that is pretty dark. I guess I can't even really explain why I think it's funny, but it's probably just like I don't expect people to make jokes like that, or I don't expect the punchline, which, surprise is a big, big component of comedy. And I'm no expert in comedy, but I want you to think about this. Like there's another thing that is very necessary to comedy or to a joke, right? There's like the unexpected part, the punchline, the thing that makes you laugh. But another aspect of it is like some part of your joke or some thought, some aspect of what you're thinking or expressing has to be at least a little bit true and relatable in order for the joke to be funny. Now, you could debate me on that point. You could say that like jokes don't need to have any aspect of truth in them, but I would beg to differ on that point. But if you look at it from that point of view, like it's very alarming to hear somebody talking about their lack of worth or their lack of meaning that they have in their lives, because I believe that they believe there's certain aspects of that that are true. And I've also had somebody tell me at one of the jobs that I had, like, even if somebody jokes with you about, like, the job that you're doing or the things that you're doing, like, yeah, it is a joke, but there's a certain aspect of that that is true. And so to think about that, coming back to the whole thing of, like, if all of the young people are talking about themselves in this way and they're laughing about dying and they're laughing about unaliving themselves, or other people unaliving themselves or whatever, like if that to them is funny, is there a certain aspect of that that is true to them? Just a question. And I don't know, it seems to be like a consensus among like the young people, and I think that I probably felt somewhat the same way, like it just was not allowed to express it, which could be a problem, but I also think there's value in not giving words to some of the negative or destructive feelings and thoughts that you have. And I think that like in society today, like there's a lot of people that would feel worthless or feel like a lack of meaning and purpose in their life. And I don't think it's just high school students. I think it goes into the 20s, 30s, probably even older than that. I think it's fair to say that the majority of society would also be moving away from relationships that, have a lot of commitment, that kind of like tie you down. And like they're moving away from that toward commitments that, or relationships that just have like less commitment. They're going to inconvenience you less, so to speak. And, marriage isn't the cool thing to do anymore. Maybe it never was. Marriage, kids, they're not cool. There was a study done years ago even, and they asked a bunch of kids, like, what do they want to be when they grow up? And, like, what it came down to is, like, people want to be famous and they want to have lots of money. There was nothing about commitment. There was nothing about, things that tie them down, like a family or kids or things like that. It's all about you and you being famous and having all of this money and doing everything that you want to do. People don't want to spend all that time and money investing in something that is going to be their ball and chain, so to speak, which is the way some people refer to marriage. But if you think about it, on the other hand, like there's a sense of hopelessness and a lack of meaning and fulfillment in these people's lives, the same people that are running away from these relationships that require a lot of commitment. It's almost like these people need to find something that they can focus a lot of time, energy, and maybe even money on in order, something that would bring them a lot of happiness, something that would bring them a lot of joy. Maybe they need something like that. And I don't, like, folks that have never been married, never had kids, will never realize the joy that comes from taking all of this time, all of your time, and investing money, investing time, investing attention into other humans that love you deeply. It's something that will bring importance to your life. People are out there floating around in life, like avoiding commitment to the best of their ability. And in the next breath, they turn around and complain about how they are important to no one and that nobody cares about them and nobody loves them. And as a father, like, I would just ask you, like, how would it feel for you to walk through the front door after coming home from work? You walk through the front door and there's one, maybe two, maybe three people that like yell your name, like so happy to see you. How would it feel to have people depend upon you? Would that give you significance or importance in your life? And how would it feel to not only meet the needs of those people that love you and that trust you and that care about you? How would it feel to meet the needs of the people that are like such big fans of yours? I just want to close with this saying, all of the magic you were looking for might be in the work that society has convinced you is a bad thing that just brings you a lot of pain. Because that, I feel, is like the way a lot of people think about marriage and having kids. A lot of commitment, a lot of pain, a lot of giving. And all of those things are true, but the outcome of those things is with commitment, with sticking with it, with working on those things, investing time and money into people, into a family, into a spouse. It gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you an anchor. It gives you something to come back to when all the rest of the world is like crashing down around you. I mean, you could go out there and make 50 calls and nobody picks up the phone and answers your call. You could send 500 emails and nobody replies to your email. And yet you could walk home, walk through the front door, and like there's your kids that are so happy to see you. There's your wife that's so happy to see you. And all of those things that bogged you down and that bothered you so much don't matter that much anymore, because there are people that love you, there are people that care about you, there are people that depend upon you, and there are people that hold you in some type of significance. They put some importance on your life, which gives you importance for your life. It's just something to think about, something to ponder on this week. And I don't know, maybe you guys don't agree with all of the stuff that I said. You can argue with me. Put it in the comments down below. Maybe it'll give me some fodder for some new podcasts, for some future podcasts, you could say. And I just wanted to come on here and say some of this stuff. I just wanted to talk about it because I really, really think that there's so many benefits with marriage, with commitment, with family, that a lot of people don't talk about. There's a lot of benefits that outweigh all of that pain and all of that struggle and all of those things that people tell you in order to convince you not to get married. Those things are true, but the pros most times will outweigh the cons, and it definitely makes it worth it if you're willing to be open to bettering yourself and just becoming a better person through commitment and through hard work, time, and attention. Anyway, I feel like I'm rambling at this point. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you heard or what you've seen here, please subscribe here on YouTube or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Go follow us over on Instagram or on TikTok or LinkedIn. And as always, go out there and mind your own business.